Wangxinghai. Raging waves crashed on the shore rock of an island, and the seabirds on the reef fluttered their wings. This is an island shaped like a pair of gourds leaning against each other. There are two freshwater lakes, one large and one small, on the island, so it is also called Chuanghu Island. In addition to two freshwater lakes, there are vast plains and jungles on Chuanghu Island, as well as a majestic and continuous mountain range, the Copper Mountains. The third level of qi refining has finally broken through. In a cave house in the Red Copper Mountains, a young monk wearing a blue robe with a bun on his head, his face like a crown jade, and his eyes like stars opened his eyes and said excitedly. In front of the young cultivator, a spiritual eye with a diameter of 3 inches was gurgling out with spiritual energy. Seeing this, Chen Daoxuan couldn't be bothered to be excited, and quickly used a stone plate engraved with patterns to carefully seal the spiritual eyes that were emitting spiritual energy. Chen Daoxuan breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that his spiritual eyes were no longer emitting spiritual energy. This spiritual eye is the last spiritual eye of the Chen family, and it supports the only 2 monks in the Chen family to practice. Once the spiritual eyes are exhausted, Chen Daoxuan and his 13th uncle Chen Xianhe can only refine the free aura in the air. At that time, their cultivation will inevitably be hindered, and it will be difficult for them to advance. After packing up, Chen Daoxuan stood up and walked outside the cave. Just got out of the cave. A graceful maid, Xiang Xiang, trotted over with sweat dripping with sweat, and called softly, "Young master, the patriarch, please come over." After speaking, the maid looked at Chen Daoxuan with a look of awe on her pretty face. "Understood, you go down first." "Yes." After the maid left, Chen Daoxuan used the wind fighting technique and flew towards another mountain in the Kaitong Mountains. Chen Daoxuan is 16 years old this year. It has been 16 years since he came to this strange world. Chen Daoxuan was a mechanical engineer in Earth China in his previous life. Because of a production accident, he was reborn into this world after his death. Because of the memory of his previous life, Chen Daoxuan was really excited for a long time when he learned that this world was the world of immortal cultivation in the novels and movies of the previous life. However, this passion was quickly wiped out under the whip of reality. In Chen Daoxuan's view, the cruelty of the world of immortal cultivation far exceeds that of the civilized society of the previous life. This cruelty is not only reflected in fighting and killing, but also in the absolute monopoly of the major forces on cultivation resources. In this world, the sect and the immortal clan control almost all the cultivation resources. Small clans and loose cultivators can only get a little bit of scraps that Zongmen and cultivators don't look down on. For example, the Chen family on Chuanghu Island where Chen Daoxuan is located is a typical small cultivator family. In the most prosperous period of the Chen family, there were 13 monks in the qi refining period. Although there are no spiritual veins, there are still 7 spiritual eyes for monks to practice. Not to mention that the Chen family also occupied a miniature first-order spiritual mine, copper mine. Thoughts flipping. A mountain top lined with green pines soon appeared in front of Chen Daoxuan. This is the cave residence of Chen Xianhe, another cultivator of the Chen family on Chuanghu Island. As one of the 2 remaining monks from the Chen family on Chuanghu Island, Chen Xianhe's cultivation is much higher than that of Chen Daoxuan, and he is already a monk on the 6th level of qi refining. Uncle 13. Outside the cave, Chen Daoxuan shouted respectfully. "Come in." Inside the cave, a slightly old voice came out. Chen Daoxuan walked into the cave in response, and saw an old man wearing a grey-white robe, with his head in a bun and a childish face, sitting on the jade bed, looking at him fixedly. This old man is Chen Daoxuan's uncle, the current patriarch of the Chen family on Chuanghu Island, Chen Xianhe. "Uncle 13, are you looking for me?" Who knows that the old man saw Chen Daoxuan, the surprise in his eyes flashed, and then quickly stood up from the jade bed, walked to Chen Daoxuan in 3 or 2 steps, and said excitedly, "Daoxuan, your cultivation base." Just broke through the third level of qi refining. Chen Daoxuan nodded. When it comes to the cultivation that has just broken through, Chen Daoxuan's face is also full of joy. Good. 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 Chen Zian, he said 3 good words in a row, and then said, I didn't expect you to start practicing at the age of 6. In just 10 years, you have broken through the acquired stage, the innate stage, and the third level of qi refining. God really bless my Chen family. Speaking of this, Chen Zianhe's face turned gloomy again. It's a pity that my Chen family is in decline. If the clan brothers and the others are still there, they will buy you a Tong Mei pill, so you won't waste 5 years in the mortal realm. In this world, whether it is a mortal without spiritual roots or a seed of cultivation with spiritual roots, all must experience the cultivation of the mortal realm. That is to say, the 2 realms of acquired and innate in Chen Zianhe's mouth. For mortals, the innate 9th level in the mortal realm is the end of their life. Without spiritual roots, mortals will never be able to refine spiritual energy and enter the fairyland. For monks, the greatest significance of the mortal realm is only to warm the body and connect the meridians of the whole body, so as to lay a solid foundation for refining the spiritual qi in the next qi refining period. Chen Daoxuan practiced at the age of 6, and did not break through to the first level of qi refining until he was 11. Afterwards, after 5 years of cultivation, he was promoted to the third level of qi refining, with an average of 2.5 years to advance to the first level of cultivation. To be honest, this kind of cultivation speed is nothing in the sect and the great immortal clan, but in a small family like the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island, it seems to be invaluable. After all, compared with the cultivators, the Chen family's cultivation resources on Zhuanghu Island are extremely scarce, and even compared with the scattered cultivators, they are not much better. Dongfu's Hong. Chen Daoxuan saw that his uncle Chen Zianhe looked ashamed, and quickly said with relief, why did the 13th uncle say this, during the monster riot in Chongping County 10 years ago? If it wasn't for your help, Daoxuan would have gone to Huangchuan long ago. There's no such thing as today. Hearing what Chen Daoxuan said, Chen Zianhe seemed to recall the warm time when he took Chen Daoxuan to teach him after he rescued him, and couldn't help showing a smile on his face. Seeing that Uncle 13's face improved, Chen Daoxuan quickly changed the subject and said with a smile, Uncle 13, you came to me for the copper mine, right? Seeing Chen Daoxuan talking about the business, Chen Zianhe's expression became serious. Although the copper ore is a micro mine, our Chen family's ability to stand on Zhuanghu Island is entirely due to this spiritual mine. It is a pity that after 300 years of mining, the output of copper ore has been declining year after year, from the peak annual output of more than 100 caddies of cuprite ore to less than 5 caddies per year. I guessed that this spirit mine should be exhausted. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help feeling heavy. The Chen family on Zhuanghu Island has no spiritual veins, and the only cultivation resource they can use is this spiritual mine. It is a pity that no matter how careful it is to mine, the red copper mine is only a miniature spiritual mine after all, and it can be mined for 300 years, which is already the result of repeated savings by the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island. Seeing that Chen Daoxuan didn't speak, Chen Zianhe continued, since the red copper ore vein is about to be exhausted, it is better to mine with all your strength instead of being careful and saving. Uncle 13, this. Chen Daoxuan was shocked when he heard the words. After all, the copper mine was the lifeline of the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island. Violent mining meant that the Chen family had to give up this lifeline. For a cultivator family, this was undoubtedly a prodigal act. But the intelligent Chen Daoxuan knew in his heart that the biggest reason for Uncle 13 to do this was to provide him with the resources to learn the refining tools. Looking at Uncle 13 Chen Zianhe's firm eyes, Chen Daoxuan's mouth wriggled, and the words of refusal came to his lips, but it became, nephew obeys Uncle 13's instructions. The two discussed the details of the copper mining for a while, and Chen Daoxuan bowed and retired. It was not until he reached the entrance of the cave that Chen Xianhe's voice came from behind Chen Daoxuan. Daoxuan, now that you have been promoted to the third level of qi refining, the spiritual eyes of the family may not be enough to support you and me in cultivation. Leave it for you alone. This sentence sounded like a thunderbolt in Chen Daoxuan's heart, causing him to stop. I saw Chen Daoxuan turned around and looked at the old man with white hair sitting on the jade bed with red eyes. Go go! Chen Xianhe waved his sleeves with a gratified smile on his face. Walking out of the cave, Chen Daoxuan was in a heavy heart. In order to support his practice, Uncle 13 did not hesitate to give up his own path. This kind of enlightenment is truly shocking. When Chen Daoxuan was reborn in this world, all he heard were all kinds of insidious, cunning, plundering and killing of cultivators for their own cultivation. This kind of behavior of self-sacrifice is extremely rare in this life, even in the previous life on the earth. But thinking of Chen Xianhe's honest teaching to him over the years, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but feel relieved. Using Yu Fengshu, Chen Daoxuan shuttled through the clouds and mists in the mountains, like a man in a fairy. Speechless all the way. About half a column of incense effort, a brown mountain top appeared in front of Chen Daoxuan. Compared with the caves of Chen Daoxuan and Chen Xianhe, the top of this mountain is bare, like a hairless vulture, which is extremely ugly. Here is the miniature spiritual mine occupied by the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island, the Copper Mine, and the Copper Mountain is also named after this spiritual mine. Approaching the mine, Chen Daoxuan could see some mortals in linen shirts entering and leaving the mine, all of whom were from the Chen clan in Chongping County. On the copper mine, Chen Lianjiu, who was in charge of the mine, saw Chen Daoxuan flying from the sky at a glance. Without waiting for Chen Daoxuan to drop, Chen Lianjiu hurriedly stepped forward, bowed and said, "Congratulations to the immortal master. In this world, cultivators are the absolute ruling class. Therefore, even if Chen Daoxuan was only 16 years old, Chen Lianjiu would not dare to despise him in the slightest because of his age. You and I are both from the Chen clan, so there is no need to be more polite." Chen Daoxuan fell down in front of Chen Lianjiu and raised his hand slightly. With just one glance, Chen Daoxuan could see that Chen Lianjiu's cultivation had improved, breaking through from the 6th layer of the innate to the 7th layer of the innate. Although Chen Daoxuan only routinely visits the copper mine once a year, he is still somewhat impressed by Chen Lianjiu, the mine manager. It's just that, in the eyes of the monks, there is not much difference whether it is the 6th floor or the 7th floor. Innate stage and qi refining stage, the two are not the same level at all. After a pause, Chen Daoxuan smiled and said, "I'm here to check the copper mine production this year." Hearing this, Chen Lianjiu's vicissitudes face full of smiles suddenly collapsed. He cautiously said, "Master Immortal Master, this year's red copper mine production has dropped again, only 3 kilograms. Sure enough, hearing this, Chen Daoxuan frowned slightly. The situation was even worse than Chen Xianhe had predicted. This copper mine might have been exhausted. Even if you don't care about mining with all your strength, you probably won't be able to squeeze much inventory. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan took a deep breath. "Let's go, show me. Master Immortal, please come here." Chen Lianjiu bowed and made a gesture of please, and Chen Daoxuan walked towards the attic where the ore was stored. In the copper mine, except for the 3 mines on the mine, the miners and stewards usually live in temporary wooden houses. Among these simple wooden houses, there is a THRESTRE attic that stands out from the crowd. It is a storeroom established for temporary storage of copper ore. Usually Chen Lianjiu lives in this attic, nominally to ensure the safety of the copper ore. In fact, he didn't want to be crowded with the miners in the smelly makeshift shed. Of course, the conditions of the red copper mine are so difficult, the Chen clan is still willing to come here to work, not relying on the pressure of the immortal masters, but the generous rewards offered by the family. The family stipulates that anyone who is willing to take the initiative to mine the copper mine can be exempted from the family's tax for 1 year after serving only 3 months. And working in the copper mine, you can get 1 tael of silver per month. Such generous remuneration makes the work of miners in the copper mine a sweet and well-paid job in the eyes of the Chen clan on Zhuanghu Island. If you have to make an analogy between this position and the previous life, it is probably a state-owned enterprise. Walking to the attic where the copper ore was stored, Chen Lianjiao quickly took out the key to open the bronze lock on the door, and then led Chen Daoxuan into the attic. Turning left and right, about half a cup of tea, Chen Lianjiao handed a delicate wooden box into Chen Daoxuan's hands. When he was done, he handed over his hands. Master Immortal, all the copper ore mined from last year to now are all in this box. Chen Daoxuan nodded noncommittally, waved his hand gently, and was full of anger. Clap! The wooden box opened in response, and I saw 3 large and small 4 pieces of red ore lying quietly in the wooden box. Different from ordinary copper ore, there is an inexplicable energy circulating on this red ore. Not to mention monks, even mortals can see the strangeness of these ores. Aura. This is also the biggest difference between spirit ore and ordinary ore. Generally speaking, the grades of spirit mines are divided by the amount of aura they contain. After checking, he found that there was no problem. Chen Daoxuan patted the storage bag at his waist and put the 4 pieces of copper ore into the storage bag. Seeing this, Chen Lianjiao breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing his expression, Chen Daoxuan smiled slightly, and then described Uncle 13's instructions in detail to the person in charge of the copper mine in front of him. What? The Patriarch wants to fully exploit the red copper veins. Hearing this order from the Patriarch, Chen Lianjiao was very surprised. But in the identity of Chen Daoxuan, it is absolutely impossible to falsely pass the order of the Patriarch, that is to say, the Patriarch really intends to give up the copper mine. Also, the earnings of the copper mine are not as good as the year, and it is clear that the vein has been depleted. Instead of such a half-dead mining, it is better to increase the mining intensity, dig the entire lode upside down, and fully exploit all the deposits. Thinking of this, Chen Lianjiao raised his head. Master Xianji, if the copper ore is fully exploited, we may not have enough manpower alone, and the cost of mining will also increase greatly. Chen Daoxuan didn't care about the expenses mentioned by Chen Lianjiao. It's just about spending some silver taels. Silver taels are still valuable in the eyes of mortals, but for monks, they are not much different from scrap iron. Don't worry, I will instruct the magistrate of Chongping County to cooperate with you in this matter, and let you know in advance, just to give you a psychological preparation. Hearing this, Chen Lianjiao hurriedly bowed his head. Although it should be said, Chen Lianjiao's mood is still very bad. To fully exploit the copper ore not only means that the family has given up this spiritual mine, but also means that he is the head of the copper ore mine. You know, all along, Chen Lianjiao, by virtue of his status as the head of the copper mine, has almost equaled the magistrate of Chongping County in his position within the clan. It can be said that, in addition to the high-ranking immortal masters in the family, in terms of status, he will be Chen Lianjiao. As the head of the copper mine, Chen Lianjiao controls the mining and personnel of the mine. In addition, he can see the immortal master in the family almost every year, and can get in close contact with the immortal master. Such a beautiful difference, who wants to give up? But giving up the copper mine was the order of the Patriarch, and it was something that a mere 7th-level clan could object to. Generally speaking, except for the miners of the copper mine and the 2 remaining monks from the Chen family, almost no one lives in the Copper Mountains. Most of the Chen clan live in a county called Chongping County. Chongping County is located in the plain area not far from the foot of the Kaitong Mountains. The county seat is backed by the Kaitong Mountains, facing the 2 freshwater lakes of Zhuanghu Island Ryu Lake, and on the right is the deep water port of Zhuanghu Island. It's just that Wangxinghai is different from the oceans on Earth. In addition to fish resources, there are often monsters and beasts in the sea, so few mortals dare to fish in the sea. Over time, this deep water port was basically abandoned. Except for Chen Xianhe, the patriarch, who occasionally leads the children of the clan to go out to purchase supplies, this deep water port is rarely used. The population of Chongping County is about 3,000, and all the people living here are from the Chen clan. It's not that the Chen family has only reproduced such a few people in 300 years. It is the lack of cultivation resources on the island, and the number of cultivators in the clan has not been able to increase. Up to now, there are only two people, Chen Xianhe and Chen Daoxuan. In Wangxinghai, if there are not enough monks to protect them, a large population will only become the blood food of monsters. The calamity of the monsters in Chongping County 10 years ago is a living example. Although the monsters that devastated Chongping County back then were only some low-level monsters that didn't reach the rank. But for mortals, even these lowest-level monsters are existences that they cannot compete with. With Chen Xianhe alone, it is inevitable that he will not be able to protect Chongping County. This is also the fundamental reason why the population of the Chen clan has been unable to develop. Without enough monk protection, the population cannot be expanded, and without the population, the number of family monks cannot be expanded, and the two complement each other. Chongping County Government Office. The county magistrate, Chen Zhaisheng, led a group of officials including the county magistrate and the chief clerk to send Chen Daoxuan outside the county office. Looking at the group of parents and officials in Chongping County in front of him, Chen Daoxuan instructed, as for the mining of copper ore, your county government must fully cooperate with the head of the copper mine, and must not neglect your duties. Abide by the decree of the immortal master. With the scorching sun in the sky, the county magistrate Chen Zhi was wearing a splendid official uniform. Seeing the attitude of the magistrate of Chongping County, Chen Daoxuan was slightly relieved, so he stopped talking too much, and even used the wind fighting technique and went away. Watching Chen Daoxuan Yufeng leave, the officials of Chongping County showed indescribable envy in their eyes. Finished mining copper ore. Chen Daoxuan's tense nerves gradually relaxed. Today, there are only two monks in the family, Uncle 13 and him. In addition, Uncle 13, Chen Xian, is in high gear, and the pressure he needs to bear is far beyond what other monks in the immortal cultivation family can imagine. Unless he is willing to abandon the family and become a loose cultivator. But thinking of Uncle 13's meticulous care for him for so many years, even for him, Uncle 13 would rather give up the road to fulfill his selflessness. Chen Daoxuan couldn't do anything to abandon his family anyway. Soon, Chen Daoxuan's figure fell on a hill not far from his cave. This hill is the second important place in the family besides the copper mine, the fire room. When the ancestors of the Chen family established the Chen family's foundation on Zhuanghu Island, in addition to the discovery of copper ore, they also found that there were fire veins connected to the ground beneath the island. You must know that for a cultivation force, the importance of earth fire and fire veins is not at all under a mere miniature spiritual mine. It's not easy to use the fire veins of the earth fire, and it is necessary to build a building called the earth fire chamber. Unfortunately, the old ancestor of the Chen family was only a casual cultivator, and he had no ability to build a fire room at all. It was not until the rise of the monks of the family Xian that the number of monks in the family once reached 13, and only then did they gain the inheritance of the construction of the fire room by virtue of their military exploits. In other words, the building in front of Chen Daoxuan has only been built for 100 years at most. Of course, the specific year, because there is no record in the clan, Chen Daoxuan is also unknown. Taking a deep breath, Chen Daoxuan pushed open the heavy bronze door of the fire room. Accompanied by a sour squeak, the bronze door slowly opened, and as the door opened, a wave of heat hit the face. This feeling is very similar to the scene next to the melting furnace of the steel factory in the previous life. This is the place where Chen Daoxuan has stayed the most in the past 5 years. When the family built this fire room, their greatest wish was to train a craftsman for the family. It's just that most of the cultivators of the immortal character generation spent their whole lives, and they didn't see this scene until they died. Of course, the sacrifices of the immortals are not meaningless. It is precisely because of their hard work on the battlefield that they have exchanged the building of the fire room and the inheritance of a second-order refiner. If it wasn't for their sacrifices, the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island would never have the day to train a craftsman. There are 3 buildings in the Chen family's fire room. The main building is the one that Chen Daoxuan entered through the door, and it is the place where the fire veins gather. The 2 slightly shorter buildings next to it were built by Chen Daoxuan's clansmen, and the plaques were written with the words drawing room and laboratory. After routinely checking the formation in the fire room, Chen Daoxuan walked out of the fire room and pushed the door toward the laboratory next to him. Compared to the scorching heat of the fire room, the temperature in the laboratory is much cooler. However, compared with the clean and tidy fire room, the interior of the laboratory is messy. Various materials are piled up everywhere, most of which are spiritual ores that Chen Daoxuan used in refining. In addition, in the most conspicuous position of the laboratory, a cylindrical object with a diameter of about 10 meters stood quietly there, which looked a little out of tune with the rather ancient laboratory. If there are steel mill workers on Earth here, they will find that the object in front of them is similar to a modern steel furnace. It's just that compared to the steel-making furnaces on Earth, the inside of this cylindrical object is engraved with patterns, which is a bit more mysterious. Chen Daoxuan walked into the laboratory and stared at the behemoth in front of him with a complicated look in his eyes. After 5 full years of failure, he had to admit that he was taking things too simply. The moment when I first came into contact with the inheritance of the artifact 5 years ago. Chen Daoxuan, who was a mechanical engineer in his previous life, couldn't help but open his mind. Can we use modern industrial production methods to increase the output of refining equipment? According to the second-order refiner inheritance, the refining device is generally divided into 3 stages, namely refining, shaping and fusion. As far as Chen Daoxuan knew, the stage that took the longest time to make a first-order magic weapon was precisely the stage of refining. Take the example of a first-order flying sword, the Red Shadow flying sword, in the second-order weapon refining inheritance. The main material for refining the Red Shadow Fijian is the copper ore, the spiritual ore mastered in large quantities by the Chen family. And if you want to refine the Red Shadow flying sword, it will take 3 days and 3 nights just to refine the red copper ore. On the contrary, the follow-up shaping and fusion does not take too long, and generally only takes about an hour to complete. This meant that even if the refiner wanted to refine the most basic first-order low-grade flying sword, he would have to work uninterruptedly in the fire room for 3 days and 3 nights. Greatly affects the production efficiency. In the eyes of Chen Daoxuan, a mechanical engineer, this purely manual production method is simply chronic suicide. Over the years, in order to develop the furnace he envisioned, Chen Daoxuan smashed most of the resources that should have been used to learn the refining tools, but unfortunately it backfired. Chen Daoxuan, who owns Suhui, knows that scientific research may never be rewarded, but as long as it is successful, the rewards are also amazing. Fortunately, with the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, the speed of my learning of refining is far beyond the imagination of outsiders. Chen Daoxuan muttered. The Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic in his mouth was discovered in his own sea of consciousness when he broke through to the Kyrfining stage 5 years ago and opened up the sea of consciousness. Then, it roamed quietly in the center of Chen Daoxuan's sea of consciousness. Mysterious, peaceful, with a touch of golden light. Chen Daoxuan had never seen the text in this scripture, but he understood its meaning and could still read it silently. Translated, the name of this sutra is called Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. This scripture is not long. Chen Daoxuan finished reading it silently, which just took a stick of incense. When he first started meditating on this verse, he had not noticed anything unusual. Just after meditating, I feel full of consciousness, my mind is clearer, and I feel refreshed. However, after learning the knowledge of refining tools for a period of time and beginning to try to refine copper ore for the first time, Chen Daoxuan discovered the horror of this scripture. Normally, even a Tier 1 refiner would feel mentally exhausted and sluggish after refining the spirit ore for 3 days and 3 nights at a high load. What's more, Chen Daoxuan was only a rookie at the first level of Qi refining at the time, and the situation was even more unbearable. He remembered that when he finished refining the copper ore in the fire room for the first time, he simply slumped to the ground, and the entire sea of consciousness seemed to be shattered by someone. Afterwards, he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. At this time, an unexpected thing happened. Not only did the muddy sea of consciousness return to normal, but even his divine consciousness faintly increased. After this incident, Chen Daoxuan knew that the value of Hongmen's enlightenment of the Dao Sutra alone could restore the cultivator's consciousness. Although spiritual medicines to restore consciousness are not uncommon in the world of cultivating immortals, each of them is expensive, and it is not something that a small family like the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island can expect. This is also the reason why he has made great progress in refining with the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, and he does not dare to show it easily. Of course, in addition to concealing the existence of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, he also needs to use the family's support for his refining resources to develop the furnace in front of him. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan's eyes became firm again. Anyway, these 5 years are not without gains at all, maybe tomorrow will be my moment of success. Chen Daoxuan secretly encouraged himself. According to his assumption, the furnace in front of him should be able to replace the process of cultivating spiritual ore, just like the steel-making furnace on Earth. However, there is a big difference between refining spirit ore and refining ordinary ores. That's aura. For ordinary iron ore, refining it only requires high-temperature smelting. But the spirit ore is different. While smelting it at high temperature, the aura on the smelted spirit ore must also be fused together. This touched Chen Daoxuan's knowledge blind spot. Let him refine the ore at high temperature, and he can still tinker with it, but the fusion of spiritual rhythm, according to the records in the inheritance of the refining tool, can only rely on the spiritual power of the monk to slowly integrate it. Apart from that, there are no other methods mentioned in the family's second-order weapon refining inheritance. Maybe there is no other way in this world at all. Because Chen Daoxuan found that, according to the thoughts of the cultivators, no matter what happened, the first thing they thought of was to rely on their own strength to solve the problem, rather than relying on external things. This is fundamentally different from Earth civilization. Whether it is alchemy, weapon refining, talisman making, or even during the battle, immortal cultivators tend to rely more on their own strength. Even if having a powerful magic weapon can take a lot of advantage in battle, the cultivator is still more keen to improve his own cultivation. This is also the reason why alchemists are often more popular than alchemists. Closer to home. In the past 5 years, Chen Daoxuan has devoted all his attention to the furnace in front of him, apart from learning the knowledge of traditional craftsmanship. To say it failed is not entirely correct. The furnace in front of him was divided into 5 parts by Chen Daoxuan according to its functions. They are the control system, the feeding port, the heating and melting system, the floating system and the discharging port. The core of which is the control system. When it comes to the control system, this is what Chen Daoxuan is most proud of. Because the core driving formation in this control system was originally created by Chen Daoxuan based on the formation knowledge in the second-order weapon refining inheritance, plus his own ideas. In addition, he used the sliding rod to control the distance between the spirit stone and the driving array, so he could control the amount of aura received by the driving array, thereby controlling the temperature in the furnace. In other words, through this furnace, with the cooperation of a few mortals, the copper ore can be melted. The only problem that cannot be solved now is how to integrate the aura on the spiritual ore. This problem has plagued Chen Daoxuan for almost a year. Since the driving formation pearl jade was in front, he was more inclined to create a new formation to fuse the aura on the spiritual ore, but unfortunately it has not been successful. Chen Daoxuan stood in front of the furnace with a stack of blueprints in his hand. Upon closer inspection, the drawings on this stack of drawings are all 3 views and detailed drawings of the furnace in front of you. The only place where it's empty is the bottom of the furnace. Because according to Chen Daoxuan's vision, there should be a formation that can integrate the spiritual charm of spiritual ore. Ugh! After a long time, Chen Daoxuan sighed. This feeling of being close to the door is really uncomfortable. After thinking about it for a long time, and thinking of the pain in his head, Chen Daoxuan slowly stopped his thoughts. Put down the drawing in your hand. Chen Daoxuan simply meditated on the spot, closed his eyes and recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. For him, reciting the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic and practicing Giwen Gong every day are almost unstoppable behaviors. Even compared to the practice of Giwen Gong, Chen Daoxuan recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic more times. Because every time he refines tools, he will be exhausted and his spiritual consciousness will be sluggish. At this time, as long as he silently recites the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra once, he will become alive again, and he will naturally enjoy it. Along with meditating on the scriptures, Chen Daoxuan fell into chaos. At this moment, whether it was the flow of air or the loss of time, he didn't notice it, as if he had completely lost consciousness. Soon, the time for a stick of incense passed. Opening his eyes, Chen Daoxuan's face gradually became serious. This was the 9th time. I used to recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently before, but this phenomenon has never occurred. It's just the last few times that new changes have obviously taken place on his body. I don't know if this change is good or bad. Chen Daoxuan looked at the 9 star dusts in the sea of knowledge that revolved around the golden scriptures like stars and the moon, and muttered, "These star dusts, what are they?" With a heavy heart, Chen Daoxuan walked out of the laboratory. This time, he didn't even carry out the daily routine of refining equipment, so he hurriedly left Yufeng, and he stole his first laziness in 5 years. By the time Chen Daoxuan came to the 13th Uncle Cave mansion again, it was already late. Raising his head, he glanced at the moonless sky. This was the 16th year that he came to this world. Because he has a mature soul in his body, Chen Daoxuan always feels a little out of tune with this world when he is alone. Dao Xian. Just when he was in a trance, an old voice pulled him back. After returning to his senses, Chen Daoxuan found that the 13th Uncle Chen Zian he was standing in front of him, looking at him with concern. Uncle 13. Chen Daoxuan hurriedly bowed and saluted. Chen Zian he stepped forward, patted his shoulder lightly, and pointedly said, "Son, I'm sorry for you." Chen Daoxuan was silent. After a long while, he took out 3 large and 1 small 4 pieces of copper ore from the storage bag. "Uncle 13, this is the ore taken from the copper mine today, as you expected, the copper ore production has dropped again." Although he had expected it, when he heard the news, Chen Zian he still felt a little uncomfortable. For the past 300 years, the copper veins of the Chen family have supported the cultivation of the family monks. It is about to be completely lost now, not to mention the loss of interests. As the only old man of the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island, it is emotionally difficult to accept. Chen Zian he can still remember the wanton and unrestrainedness when he was chatting and laughing with his 12 brothers. Now, with the passage of time, everything seems to have gone by in the blink of an eye. The clan brothers died on the battlefield, but he, the youngest clan brother, had to shoulder the heavy responsibility of the family. Chen Daoxuan didn't have much affection for the copper ore. In his eyes, the copper ore was just a vein of spiritual ore, nothing more. Chen Zian he glanced at the copper ore that Chen Daoxuan handed over, shook his head and said, "You should keep these copper ore for refining and learning." "Yes, Uncle 13. Chen Daoxuan bowed to answer the order. "By the way, how is your progress in learning the refining tool now?" Talking about Chen Daoxuan's learning of refining, Chen Zianhe couldn't help showing a nervous look on his face. Hearing Chen Zianhe asking about his level of refining, Chen Daoxuan said solemnly, "There are a total of 13 types of refining methods recorded in the family's refining heritage, including 12 first-order tools and 1 second-order. At present, I have only mastered the refining methods of 6 first-order low-grade instruments. As for the refining of the other 4 first-grade middle-grade instruments and 2 first-grade high-grade instruments, my nephew has not yet mastered them." Hearing Chen Daoxuan's answer, Chen Zianhe's eyes were full of relief. In just 5 years, it is quite good to have mastered all the refining techniques of the first-order low-grade instruments in the inheritance of the family's instrument refining. Chen Zianhe knew clearly that although the family had a heritage of refining tools, no one taught them. Chen Daoxuan's learning of refining tools is entirely by himself, and Chen Zianhe has a deep understanding of the degree of difficulty. Because the monks of their immortal generation have all taught themselves the inheritance of the family's second-order weapon refining, and they all can't get in. The way of refining tools is inherently difficult. In addition to consuming a lot of resources, it also requires someone to teach them to go more smoothly on this road. This is also the reason why there are almost no alchemists and alchemists in the loose cultivation. Just one piece of artifact refining inheritance will keep everyone out of the door, let alone the various resources expended in learning the artifact. Seeing Chen Zianhe's satisfied look, Chen Daoxuan was embarrassed. Because he just lied. In fact, he not only mastered the refining of 6 first-order low-grade magic tools, but also the 13 kinds of magic tools in the family's inheritance of refining tools. He only did not master the refining method of second-order magic tools. In addition, Chen Daoxuan has mastered the refining of all the first-order magic tools in the inheritance of the refining tools. To be precise, the current Chen Daoxuan is already a first-order high-grade refiner. It's not that he is clumsy, but the news is too shocking. The cultivation base is only 3 levels of qi refining, but the level of refining has reached a level that many senior first-order refiners of the 9th level of qi refining cannot reach, and they rely entirely on self-study. This is no longer a genius, but a demon. Of course. Due to his cultivation, although Chen Daoxuan has mastered the refining method of first-order high-grade instruments, his success rate is still too low to successfully refine them. The reason is that the first-order high-grade magic tools need to be refined with more first-order spiritual ores, and the refining time is longer. With Chen Daoxuan's infuriating energy and spiritual awareness, it is difficult to support it to the end. As for the subsequent shaping and fusion, it is not too difficult for him. He has studied artifact refining for 5 years, and it is only occasionally that he succeeds in refining a first-order high-grade artifact. With his cultivation base, there is no pressure to refine first-order low-grade instruments, but it is a bit reluctant to refine first-order middle-grade instruments, and refining first-order high-grade instruments is entirely a matter of luck. It's not that his level of refining is not enough, but that his cultivation is not enough, and his true qi and consciousness are not enough. This is also the reason why Chen Daoxuan is so eager to develop a spirit ore furnace. With the help of this kind of furnace, he can save the consumption of infuriating energy and spiritual consciousness in the stage of refining materials, allowing him to deal with the shaping and fusion of magical instruments more easily. At that time, let alone a first-order high-grade magic tool, it is a second-order magic tool, and Chen Daoxuan is not unable to try it. The embarrassed look on Chen Daoxuan's face flashed, and he quickly adjusted his attitude and said sincerely, "My nephew does not dare to take credit. If it weren't for the strong support of the family over the years, my level of refining would not have improved so fast." On this point, Chen Daoxuan did not talk nonsense. In the past 5 years, if the various spirit minerals invested by the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island were converted into spirit stones, there would be at least 5,000 spirit stones. Such a huge amount of wealth, not to mention a loose cultivator, even an ordinary cultivator family can't get it. In addition to the accumulation of 300 years, the Chen family of Shuanghu Island still relies on the wealth accumulated by the monks of the immortal generation on the battlefield. Even so, Chen Daoxuan's learning of refining tools still brought heavy pressure to the family, so that the patriarch Chen Zianhe had to consider giving up the copper mine and fully cultivate Chen Daoxuan. Hearing Chen Daoxuan's words, Chen Zianhe nodded with a smile. "Don't take credit and don't be arrogant, very good." With that said, Chen Zianhe changed his words. "Daoxuan, you know that our family is poor, so you must cherish the opportunity that the family gives you to learn to refine. Remember, nephew." Then, Chen Daoxuan reported to Chen Zianhe about the full-scale mining of copper ore, and Yu Feng left. Watching Chen Daoxuan leave, Chen Zianhe paced back to his cave. As the current patriarch of the Chen family, although the spiritual eyes in Chen Zianhe's cave mansion are exhausted, in terms of size and style, it far exceeds Chen Daoxuan's cave mansion. Of course, the reason why Chen Zianhe did not build Chen Daoxuan's cave in a luxurious style was to prevent Chen Daoxuan from indulging in extravagant enjoyment at a young age. This painstaking effort is destined to be impossible to tell outsiders. After several turns, Chen Zianhe walked to a wall made of broken dragon stone. I saw him stretch out his palm, and with the activation of infuriating energy, the formation pattern on the wall suddenly lit up. Immediately afterwards, the wall made of broken dragon stone slowly moved away, and the entrance was actually a secret room. As Chen Zianhe stepped into the secret room, the spiritual light inside was shining, and the densely placed spiritual stones were all about the size of a baby's fist. Chen Daoxuan, who returned to his cave, would naturally not know. The 13th uncle, who just kept saying that his family was poor, was actually counting his belongings in the secret room full of spirit stones. Inside the cave, Chen Daoxuan opened the stone plate that sealed the spiritual eye, and suddenly, the spiritual energy burst out again. Seeing this, he didn't dare to waste the slightest bit, and hurriedly started Giwen Gong to bring the spiritual energy into the body to refine. Cultivating the immortal realm in Wangxinghai. According to the efficiency of cultivating spiritual energy, the spiritual roots of monks are generally divided into 4 grades, namely lower spiritual roots, middle spiritual roots, upper spiritual roots, and heavenly spiritual roots. Normally, the lower spiritual root cultivator absorbs a lot of spiritual energy into the body, often only refining 1 point, and the efficiency is very low. Therefore, under the conditions of the same resources, the cultivation speed of the lower spiritual cultivator is the slowest. The efficiency of cultivating spiritual energy is much higher for the cultivator of the middle spiritual root, which is generally twice that of the cultivator of the lower spiritual root. The speed at which the cultivator of the spiritual roots refines the spiritual energy will be doubled again, and the very spiritual energy can be refined by 4 points. The most terrifying thing is the heavenly spiritual root cultivator. The spiritual energy absorbed into the body can be completely refined. With the same resources, the cultivation speed is 10 times that of the lower spiritual roots cultivator. As for Chen Daoxuan, he also didn't know what level of spiritual roots he had. Because the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island did not have a magic tool to detect spiritual roots, the family cultivators could only vaguely judge their spiritual root level based on the speed at which they refined spiritual energy. In addition, there is no accurate reference standard. Whether this judgment is right or not can only be a matter of opinion. According to the patriarch Chen Zianhe, the spiritual root he possesses is the lower spiritual root. Because of this, the patriarch began to practice cultivation at the age of 10, and it took 80 years to reach the 6th level of qi refining. It is true that Chen Zianhe's cultivation is so slow, and there is a factor of insufficient family cultivation resources, but the main reason is that his own cultivation aptitude is really poor. And Chen Daoxuan's cultivation speed is much faster. In just 5 years, he has broken through all the way to the 3rd level of qi refining. At this speed, he would be able to catch up with Chen Zianhe's 6th level qi refining in a maximum of 10 years. Compared with Chen Xianhe's 80 years of cultivation, he reached the 6th level of qi refining, and his cultivation speed was more than 4 times faster. That is to say, if Chen Xianhe's spiritual root level is a lower spiritual root, then Chen Daoxuan is at least an upper spiritual root. In addition to the Onanamilian cultivator, Chen Daoxuan's spiritual root level is already the top. This is to say that he was born in a small family such as the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island, and was replaced by a large family of cultivators, such as Chen Daoxuan, who has long been given the best treatment for training. Not to mention that he still has a terrifying talent for refining. The next morning, Chen Daoxuan, who had been practicing all night, refined the last breath of spiritual energy, and felt the infuriating energy in his danshan gradually consolidating, and his face couldn't help showing a satisfied look. He just broke through the 3rd level of qi refining, and after only 1 night of cultivation, he consolidated the vein true qi. He was very satisfied with this progress. At this speed, in 3 years at most, he can break through the 4th level of qi refining and become a mid-level qi refining cultivator. You know, breaking through the 4th level of qi refining increases the strength of a cultivator much more than breaking through the 3rd level of qi refining. According to the records of Giwen Gong, a cultivator's true qi can increase by at least 50% from the initial stage of qi refining to the middle stage of qi refining, far exceeding the increase of 20% when breaking through the 3rd level of qi refining. After finishing the practice, Chen Daoxuan sealed the spiritual eye in the cave with a stone plate again, so that the spiritual energy no longer overflowed. After doing all this, he couldn't help falling into a deep groan. As usual, every morning, after finishing his cultivation, he would recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. But now, his consciousness sank, and he fell into contemplation as he looked at the 9 stardust revolving around the golden scriptures in the sea of knowledge. To be honest, he was a little unsure whether he should continue to recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment scripture silently. The 9 stardust in the sea of knowledge appeared after he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment classic for 9 consecutive days. Today is the 10th day, and he continues to meditate on the scriptures, and he does not know what changes will happen. But Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic is Chen Daoxuan's biggest trump card, and it is obviously impossible for him to give up. Forget it, it's a blessing, not a disaster. It's a disaster that can't be avoided. Since I can't let go of this opportunity, I must be mentally prepared to be attacked by this opportunity. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan's eyes became firm again. Next, close your eyes and recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. Soon, a wave of Dao rhyme circulated in Chen Daoxuan's sea of consciousness, and then, he fell into chaos and lost consciousness. Only his mouth was still instinctively reciting the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. The time for a stick of incense is fleeting. When Chen Daoxuan opened his eyes again, he found that there was another stardust in his sea of consciousness. The 10th one. Chen Daoxuan pondered, it's just. He frowned, this time it seems a little different. Chen Daoxuan found that the 10 star-dusts revolving around the golden scriptures in the sea of consciousness seemed to be attracting each other this time. If it wasn't for Chen Daoxuan's deliberate control, these 10 stardusts would have aggregated into one. Want to be one? Chen Daoxuan murmured, and then his eyes were firm, then it will fulfill you. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan no longer controlled stardust and let them collide together. Boom! When the 10 stardust collided together, Chen Daoxuan's consciousness was blank at first, then he felt that his consciousness was constantly rising, and finally, his consciousness seemed to be in the scene of the Big Bang of the universe. This is deep in the sea of knowledge. The countless knowledge he had learned came to him like a tide. Among these knowledge, there were knowledge that he had learned in the past life but had already been vaguely impressed, and there was also the knowledge that he had studied hard in this life and impressed him. For example, the main practice method Giwen Gong that he practices every day. Chen Daoxuan's consciousness lightly clicked on the Giwen Gong exercise. In an instant, a lot of insights about Giwen Gong came to my mind. It turns out that Giwen Gong should be cultivated in this way. No wonder I used to practice, and I always felt that something was wrong. It turned out that this kind of cultivation can absorb the spiritual energy to a greater extent. In just a split second, he discovered a problem he had never realized before. It turns out that I can still practice like this. What the is going on? Why do I feel like I've become so much smarter all of a sudden? This feeling is like a legendary epiphany. That's right, epiphany. He remembered a cultivation phenomenon recorded in the ancient family books Epiphany. It's just that the opportunity of epiphany only exists in legends. Most cultivators will never encounter an epiphany in their entire life. But what's going on now? When 10 stardust collided together, he had an epiphany. After thinking about all this, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but be stunned by this shocking opportunity. Correct. Spirit or furnace. Chen Daoxuan immediately remembered the problem that bothered him the most, which was the spirit fusion formation on the spirit or furnace. Because he had created a brand new formation method before the driving formation method, Chen Daoxuan felt that he had a high talent in the formation method. Therefore, he wants to continue to create new formations to solve the problem of aura fusion in the process of refining spirit ore. But after thinking hard for a year, there is still not much clue. In the sea of consciousness space, Chen Daoxuan looked at the dense group of lights floating in front of him. Each of these light groups represents the knowledge he has learned, some of which are profound and some of them simple. It is manifested in the sea of consciousness, that is, the size and brightness of the light clusters are different. For example, he just opened the light group representing the Giwen Gong exercise, which records all his insights and processes of practicing Giwen Gong in the past 5 years. Therefore, this light group is also the brightest and largest of all light groups. Besides, the second largest light group is the knowledge of refining tools. Chen Daoxuan quickly opened it. Sure enough, the refining methods of the 12 first-order magical tools and the insights during refining are all recorded in this light group. In addition to these, there is an unfinished and incomplete magical tool, which is the spiritual ore furnace that Chen Daoxuan has painstakingly researched for 5 years. So it is. Chen Daoxuan's consciousness fluctuated violently, and bursts of joy and satisfaction flooded into his heart. The direction I thought before was completely wrong. The fusion of spiritual consciousness is to use a violent suppression method to force the aura on many spiritual ores to merge into one, and I want to achieve this kind of strong pressure through the formation method. It's a little unrealistic. After all, the formation has no spiritual wisdom, and can only exert its power through the manipulation of manipulators. At this time, mortals who do not have spiritual consciousness cannot master the strength to suppress the spiritual rhythm. The suppression force is too large, the aura collapses, and the suppression force is too small, and the aura cannot be merged. Therefore, the key to the fusion spirit formation is to guide, not suppress. That's right. This is the key to the fusion spirit formation. If you follow this line of thinking, the fusion formation should be arranged like this. With the blessing of 10 star dusts, Chen Daoxuan's comprehension has been directly increased tenfold, and he can't think of a clue in a year. At this moment, in less than a stick of incense, a complete fusion spirit formation was actually created. Soon, the time for a stick of incense has passed. Chen Daoxuan only felt that his eyes were dark, and his consciousness withdrew from the depths of the sea of knowledge. Ended. Opening his eyes, Chen Daoxuan realized that this epiphany was over. Unfortunately, it would be great if the epiphany lasted a little longer. Chen Daoxuan muttered to himself in an inexhaustible way. Immediately, he thought of the fusion spirit formation method again, and he couldn't care about anything at the moment. The spiritual ore furnace can be said to be the thing that took the most effort since he came to this world. Chen Daoxuan worked hard to learn the knowledge of tool refining, in order to combine the knowledge of the two worlds to create a magic tool that even mortals can use. Only in this way can the vast population of mortals play their true role. Instead of being like the clansmen in Chongping County, they can only be reduced to a reproductive tool that provides seeds for immortal cultivation. Now, this magic weapon is finally coming out. Think of this. Chen Daoxuan could no longer hold back his eager heart. When he even used the wind control technique, he flew directly from the cave to the top of the fire room. In a hurry, Chen Daoxuan's speed in the wind was 2 or 3 points faster than usual. In less than half a cup of tea, the 3 buildings of the fire room came into view. Chen Daoxuan lowered his body and pushed open the door of the laboratory. Seeing the huge silver-white metal furnace placed in the center of the laboratory, I fell into contemplation. According to the spirit ore furnace refining method he just realized, the furnace in front of him is obviously a failure. In fact, according to the description of the magic tool in the family's inheritance of the refining tool, it can also judge the failure of this furnace. Because of a successful magic weapon, it is impossible to see the formation pattern on the surface, and all the formation patterns will be integrated into the magic weapon itself in the final fusion stage. However, the surface of the furnace in front of him was covered with patterns. Forget it, rarefining it, and rarefining it. With a sigh, Chen Daoxuan knew that it was impossible to read the formation method on the basis of this furnace. It is impossible to refine half of the instruments and continue refining them afterwards. The reason for this is because of the spirit. In the fusion formation stage, the refiner needs to use the formation method to perfectly fuse the aura on the refined and shaped instrument embryo, so as to exert the power of the instrument. For any instrument, if the aura dissipates, it means that the instrument is destroyed. Even if the main material of this magic weapon looks intact, it can still be used as a weapon in the hands of mortals. But for cultivators, magic tools have no aura, and they are just sharper mortal tools. Thoughts were surging in his mind, but the movements in his hands were not slow at all. The laboratory he built was full of various spiritual ores used for refining, as well as ordinary iron ores. That's right, iron ore. This furnace is so huge, it is naturally impossible to refine it all with spiritual ore. In fact, the main material of this furnace is just ordinary iron ore. It's just that Chen Daoxuan added a kind of spiritual ore called silver moonstone to it. Therefore, the cost of this furnace is not exaggerated, at most it is comparable to a first-order high-grade magic weapon. In fact, it is normal to think about it carefully, otherwise, how much spiritual ore would it take for such a huge furnace? Whether it is possible to fill in the entire copper mine of the Chen family can be said, which also loses the original intention of refining it. Fortunately, the silver moonstone is still in stock. Chen Daoxuan rummaged through the boxes, and finally found the spiritual mine he was looking for in a corner of the laboratory. As for ordinary iron ore, there is no need to worry about this. There is an iron ore vein with considerable reserves on Zhuanghu Island. When Chen Daoxuan prepared all the refining materials, it was already noon. He touched the storage bag at his waist. Chen Daoxuan pushed open the door of the fire room. As the bronze door of the fire room opened, the heat wave came again. Call. Chen Daoxuan sighed and walked firmly towards the heat-gathering formation in the center of the fire room. Although there was no flame, Chen Daoxuan could feel a huge amount of heat gathering above the heat-gathering formation, waiting to melt the material in it. Chen Daoxuan took out the iron ore and Yunya mine from the storage bag, and piled them into 2 mines, one large and one small. For the furnace artifact, refining the material is not difficult. The main reason is that the iron ore is so refined that it is almost melted into molten iron when it is placed over the heat-gathering array. Compared with the hard torfine spiritual ore, ordinary ore is like a docile sheep. Refining, shaping, these 2 steps did not encounter any difficulties. In front of Chen Daoxuan, a behemoth with a respect of dozens of tons was lifted up by him with infuriating energy and floated in the air. Next, is the most difficult fusion formation. Taking a deep breath and calming down the boiling Danshan Qi, Chen Daoxuan worked his way up and engraved the lines of the formation on the furnace in front of him. The first heavy drive pattern. The second reunion heat pattern. The third layer of floating formations, and the most important fourth layer of formations, the fusion of spirit formations. Success. As the last pattern was inscribed, the furnace in front of him emitted a golden light. Afterwards, the golden light slowly converged, and all the patterns merged into the furnace's body little by little. Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxuan jumped up happily, excited. The feeling of excitement this Zhong felt was no less than when he had obtained the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. Looking at the silver-white behemoth in front of him, Chen Daoxuan felt an indescribable satisfaction in his heart. It doesn't seem appropriate to call it the spirit ore furnace again. From now on, I'll call you, the spirit furnace. Chen Daoxuan looked at the furnace in front of him and gave it a new name. After 5 years of research and development, the magic weapon has finally landed. The first thing Chen Daoxuan has to do is to try this melting furnace. He wanted to see if this spirit melting furnace was as he imagined, without consuming infuriating energy and divine sense, and just manually manipulating the 2 levers on the control system to control this magical instrument. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan couldn't wait even more. He hurriedly took out 2 pieces of copper ore from the storage bag and threw them in through the feeding port of the Rongling furnace. This time, Chen Daoxuan did not use the slightest bit of infuriating energy, he did it manually. I saw him gently move the second lever of the Rongling furnace console. As Chen Daoxuan manipulated the operation lever, the driving formation slowly ran under the control of the spirit stone, driving the floating formation on the Rongling furnace. Play a role. After the 2 pieces of copper ore entered the Rongling furnace from the feeding port, they were controlled by the floating array and hovered in the center of the furnace. The first step is complete. Seeing that the Rongling furnace was running as he imagined, Chen Daoxuan was greatly encouraged. Next, it is to heat and smelt the spirit ore. He continued to operate the first operating lever, and by controlling the distance between the spiritual stone and the driving array, he controlled the input of spiritual energy, thereby controlling the operation of the heat-gathering array. I saw Chen Daoxuan slowly push the operating lever, and under the action of the heat-gathering array, the temperature inside the melting furnace rose sharply. Soon, it reached the temperature that Chen Daoxuan's heat-gathering formation could reach when he normally refines his utensils. This is the end. Seeing the Rongling furnace running quietly, Chen Daoxuan felt an unprecedented ease. It feels like watching the production of automated machines in previous lives. Of course, Chen Daoxuan knew in his heart that the real test had not yet come. The most difficult problem for the Rongling stove is the fusion of aura. Although the Rongling formation on the Rongling stove was his epiphany, he could not guarantee whether it would work or not. With the passage of time, even the red copper ore could not withstand the uninterrupted high temperature smelting in the Rongling furnace. 4 hours later, the 2 copper ore finally melted. Seeing this scene, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but cheer up. He knew that the most critical time had come. Under the observation of consciousness, Chen Daoxuan found that in the melting furnace, the 2 red liquid groups slowly merged into one under the action of the floating array. Not only that, the aura on the 2 liquid groups is actually slowly merging. This is not that he is using his divine sense to suppress and fuse the aura. In fact, his divine sense has not touched the aura on the copper ore, let alone suppressing the fusion of the 2, except for observing in the furnace. Obviously, this is the effect of the fusion spirit formation. Woohoo! At the moment when the aura merged, a burst of white light emerged from the top of the Rongling furnace, and this burst of white light was accompanied by a rapid roar. This sound is somewhat like the sound of high-pressure water vapor in the previous life. This is a small design made by Chen Daoxuan based on the spiritual pressure changes generated by the fusion of spiritual rhythms on the spirit mine, which is equivalent to a feedback system to remind the smelters that the spirit mine has been refined. Otherwise, mortals have no spiritual consciousness, how can they know whether the spirit ore has been successfully refined? When Chen Daoxuan heard this short whimper, he was happier than hearing Zional. He hurriedly operated the joystick, and the refined liquid spirit ore slowly floated out from the discharge port. Okay. Chen Daoxuan was very excited. He took the refined red copper slug in front of him with infuriating energy, checked it carefully with his divine sense, and found that it was no different from the copper ore he had refined. Great! In this way, as long as there are enough melting furnaces, my refining efficiency can be at least dozens of times. Chen Daoxuan couldn't help but said. Taking the refining of the red shadow flying sword as an example, Chen Daoxuan originally needed to refine the materials for 3 days and 3 nights, but now he only needs to complete the shaping and fusion of the magic weapon. However, the shaping and fusion of the first-order magic tools are relatively simple. Even if the fusion is a little more difficult, it can be done in at most an hour. In other words, the original workload of 3 days and 3 nights has now been reduced to 1 hour, and the work efficiency has increased by 36 times. Chen Daoxuan, a craftsman, outnumbered 36 craftsmen in the outside world. Even more terrifying, this efficiency can be replicated. Once this revolutionary instrument is popularized, in the future, as long as the family has only one artifact refiner, it is equivalent to the birth of 36 artifact refiners in the outside world. With this thing, are you still worried that there is no spirit stone? Still worried that there are no cultivation resources? At this moment, Chen Daoxuan felt an unprecedented ease. Once the family declined and the monks in the family withered, it was like a mountain pressing down on his heart, making him dare not relax for a moment. But at this moment, he finally cleared the clouds and saw the sky, and all the pressure was gone from him. However, in order for the melting furnace to function, the ground fire chamber connected to the fire veins of the ground fire is essential, otherwise the heat gathering array will not be able to function. After speaking, he glanced at the small fire room he was in, and shook his head. This fire room is definitely not good, and the terrain here is not suitable for building a refining workshop. After thinking about it carefully, he still felt that Chongping County was in a good location. Chongping County is located in the plain area and has a broad space for development. Even if you want to expand the refining workshop in the future, it is only a matter of words. But the premise of all this is that you need money. But Chen Daoxuan knew that the family no longer had much money. Over the years, in order to support him in learning to forge, the family has invested at least 5,000 spirit stones. You know, 5,000 spirit stones are a huge fortune even for a foundation establishment cultivator. At least scattered cultivators, few people can come up with so many spirit stones. However, without relying on the family, who can Chen Daoxuan rely on? Although it has been 16 years since he came to this world, he has never been out of Shuanghu Island once when he has grown so big. For so many years, in addition to cultivating, he basically learned to refine tools. Uncle 13 rarely bothered him about family affairs. For the Chen family on Shuanghu Island, Chen Daoxuan's ability to become an artifact refiner is the greatest reward for the family. Contemplation for a long time. Chen Daoxuan finally decided to use the power of the family. Even if he really couldn't get help, at least he could let Uncle 13 help him come up with ideas. After all, compared with a rookie like Chen Daoxuan in the cultivation world, Chen Xianhe, who had participated in the War of Monks and had worked in the Wangxinghai Immortal Cultivation Realm and even the Xianyunzhou Immortal Cultivation Realm, was much more experienced than him. Just do it! Chen Daoxuan quickly put down the melting furnace and flew towards the cave house of the patriarch Chen Xianhe. Chen Xianhe Cave House. Now, after checking the family's secret, Chen Xianhe was holding a cup of tea, humming a little song, and lying comfortably on the chair to bask in the sun. Ah! Suddenly, Chen Xianhe sneezed fiercely and sat up from the chair with a blank face. Copper Mountains. Fire Room. Chen Xianhe stared at this huge behemoth that was several feet tall and 10 feet long in front of him, and couldn't help being stunned. What's even more peculiar is that, judging from the vague aura emanating from this behemoth, this thing is actually a magic weapon. Seeing this scene, Chen Xianhe turned to look at Chen Daoxuan next to him, and couldn't help but said, "You just said that this thing called Rongling Furnace can help you refine spiritual ore." "Right." Chen Daoxuan nodded affirmatively. To be precise, the Rongling Furnace can not only help refiners to refine spiritual ore, but also does not require monks to control it, only a few mortals can control it. Hearing this, Chen Xianhe suddenly became restless. It is incredible enough to be able to help the refiner to refine the spiritual ore. This thing does not need to be controlled by a cultivator. This is not incredible, but shocking. If it is true as Chen Daoxuan said, then the significance of this magic weapon is too great. Although Chen Xianhe failed to become an artifact refiner, he had learned the inheritance of family artifact refining in his early years, and he still understood some basic common sense of artifact refining. He knew that in the process of refining some low-level instruments, refining materials was often the most time-consuming and laborious. If a few mortals in a furnace can solve the problem of refining spiritual ore, then the refiner's refining speed must be greatly accelerated. Such a simple truth, as the patriarch of the Chen family on Zhuanghu Island, he could see it at a glance. Chen Daoxuan saw Uncle 13's skeptical expression, "No nonsense," and immediately operated it in front of him. 4 hours later. Because of the closed nature of the melting furnace, it can smelt spiritual ore faster than the refining master directly using the heat-gathering method. It usually takes 3 days to refine the copper ore, but now it only takes 4 hours to complete the refining. Chen Daoxuan said while operating the second lever to remove the crimson liquid mass from the melting furnace. Although Chen Xianhe was not an artifact refiner, he could still feel the rich aura emanating from the crimson liquid mass in front of him. He immediately took the crimson liquid mass in front of him, blinked, looked at the crimson liquid mass, and then looked at the Rongling furnace. Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! After half a cup of tea, Chen Xianhe's laughter stopped. Seemingly realizing that he had lost his temper in front of his nephew, Chen Xianhe couldn't help blushing, but soon, this emotion was left behind by him. "Dao Xian, what is the cost of refining this melting furnace?" Seeing the serious expression on Chen Xianhe's face, Chen Daoxuan couldn't help saying, "Patriarch, iron ore and silver moonstone are needed to refine the melting furnace. Iron ore is worthless, and the main cost is silver moonstone." He paused. "The stove in front of me consumed a total of 13 caddies of silver moonstones. If it was replaced with spirit stones, it would be around 195 spirit stones. Although silver moonstone is the same as the first order spirit ore of red copper ore, the price is much higher than that of red copper ore, reaching 5 spirit stones per kilogram, mainly because the reserves of silver moonstone in Wangxinghai are relatively low. Of course, as the Qianyuan sword sect continued to wage wars against the Izumo country over the years, plundering a large amount of Izumo's resources, the price of the silver moonstone was also decreasing. To be honest, the most widespread and cheapest spiritual ore in Wangxinghai is neither silver moonstone nor red copper ore, but a first-order spiritual ore called black iron. This stuff is not only abundant in Wangxinghai, but also flooded in the immortal cultivation realm of Xianyun continent. As a result, many low-level monks who neither know how to refine tools nor can afford to buy magic tools often use black iron to refine them roughly, and then directly use them as magic tools, which makes people laugh. 195 spirit stones, it's cheap, not expensive. Chen Xianhe touched his goatee and said with a smile. He knew in his heart that the mere 195 spirit stones were not worth mentioning compared to the help to the refiner. Chen Daoxuan, who was standing on the side, shook his head and said, "Ahem, Patriarch, 195 spirit stones are just the cost of this furnace, haven't you calculated the cost of building the fire chamber?" Hearing this, Chen Xianhe was taken aback. "How to build a fire room? Doesn't the family have this fire room?" Hearing that Chen Daoxuan was going to build a fire room, Chen Zianhe suddenly couldn't calm down. Chen Zianhe couldn't understand how expensive the construction of the fire room was, because this fire room was built in his hands. It took more than 2,000 spirit stones to build it back then. Seeing Chen Zianhe's appearance of an iron rooster, Chen Daoxuan's mind moved slightly, and looking at the expression of Uncle 13, it seemed that there was still a lot of stock in the family. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxuan said calmly, "Patriarch, although this fire room is good, it is too small. And there are many unreasonable places in the original arrangement, such as the heat-gathering array here. After the melting furnace, this heat-gathering array is useless, and here." Chen Daoxuan counted down the inadequacies of the fire room in front of him. It was not until Chen Zianhe's old face was blue at the end that Chen Daoxuan stopped embarrassingly. "Humph!" Chen Zianhe snorted, "Is the fire room I built so unbearable?" Seeing that Uncle 13's expression was not good, Chen Daoxuan immediately shook his head like a rattle and said, "I can't say that, but with the Rongling furnace, this fire room is really not very practical. And 13th uncle, think about it carefully. If you want to maximize the efficiency of the refiner's refining of magical instruments, at least one refiner must be equipped with 4 to 5 melting furnaces. Looking at it now, we can barely squeeze in this fire room, but what about the family's birth of more refiners in the future? Is this space enough?" Hearing this, Chen Zianhe said angrily, "There are only 2 cultivators in the family now. You just want to give birth to a lot of refiners, and none of the Zhou family dares to think about it." "Hey hey!" Seeing Chen Daoxuan smirking, Chen Zianhe pondered a long time. He looked at Chen Daoxuan solemnly and said, "Come with me." Chen Zianhe and Chen Daoxuan flew towards Chen Zianhe's cave mansion one after the other. Less than a stick of incense time. The two landed in front of the cave. Along the way, Chen Zianhe didn't say a word. Chen Daoxuan vaguely knew what Chen Zianhe was going to do, and couldn't help but look forward to it. "Enter the cave." The two turned around and stopped in front of a stone wall made of broken dragon stone. Chen Zianhe looked at the broken dragon stone whose surface was as clean as jade, and said thoughtfully, "My Chen family has been based on Zhuanghu Island for 273 years since our ancestor Chen Dengyuan. You know, the reason why our Chen family can. What is it that continues to this day?" Chen Zianhe turned around and looked at Chen Daoxuan. Chen Daoxuan thought for a while, then shook his head. "My Chen family has been able to stand for 300 years, relying on the spirit of the ancestors who did not hesitate to fight and sacrifice for the younger generation of the family. It depends on the inheritance of the younger generation of the family to the hard work and sacrifice of the ancestors." Chen Zianhe raised his head slightly, climbing to the immortal Dao, blessing the future generations. "In the past 300 years, my Chen family did it." At this moment, Chen Zianhe thought of the big brother who died generously on the battlefield, the 7th brother who fought his life to protect his youngest brother, and the ancestors who sacrificed their lives for the family, generation after generation. Infected by Chen Zianhe's sad mood, Chen Daoxuan could not help but remain silent. Although he knew that the Chen family was declining, over the years, Chen Zianhe had been doing his best to shield him from the wind and rain, until he was hunched and his temples were pale. This kind of kindness, but any individual, will not be indifferent. Uncle 13, Daoxuan, in this life, must inherit the legacy of his ancestors and live up to his ancestors and future generations. Chen Daoxuan said firmly. Hearing this, Chen Zianhe stared at him with red eyes, and finally nodded heavily, "I am lucky to have a junior like you in my Chen family." Boom boom boom. With the activation of the pattern on the broken dragon stone, the stone wall was slowly opened. With the opening of the family's secret cave, a burst of aura shone. Standing outside the secret room, Chen Daoxuan was almost blinded by the aura on these spirit stones. "This." He looked at the patriarch Chen Zianhe with a shocked face, and saw a smug smile on the other side's face. That expression seemed to say, "You kid is scared." Chen Daoxuan pursed his lips and tried his best to put on a calm expression, but the twitching of his cheeks from time to time revealed his excited heart. The family is so rich. There are so many spiritual stones, I am afraid there are 10,000, right? He looked at the spiritual stones neatly stacked on the shelf and couldn't help thinking. In the secret room, in addition to spirit stones, there are also some precious spirit minerals. In addition to copper ore and some common first-order spirit minerals, Chen Daoxuan even sensed the aura fluctuations of second-order spirit minerals. Golem! Chen Daoxuan's Adam's apple rolled, and he couldn't help swallowing. This is all the savings of my Chen family for 300 years, shocking, right? Chen Xianhe's slightly sighed voice sounded in Chen Daoxuan's ears. When I took over the position of the patriarch, the first time I saw these things, my reaction was similar to yours. Uncle 13, what's going on here? Didn't you say that the family is very poor? And since the family has so many spiritual stones, why did you give up your practice? If you replace these things with training resources, you will definitely be able to improve your life. Further, Chen Daoxuan seemed to think of something and said eagerly. Obviously, in his heart, he has always been haunted by Chen Xianhe's giving up his practice. He thought that Chen Xianhe gave up his practice for his own sake. You're right. Chen Xianhe nodded. It is true that replacing these things with cultivation resources will allow me to further improve my cultivation. If I am lucky, it is not impossible for me to step into the 9th level of qi refining, but then what? Can I build a foundation? No. Chen Xianhe sighed, for a clan with low qualifications like me, it would be unwise to use up the accumulation of my Chen ancestors' 300 years. Hearing these words, Chen Daoxuan was speechless. Live up to the ancestors, live up to the descendants. Chen Xianhe is using his actions to set the best example for him, the descendant of the Chen family. In the face of such a 13th uncle, in the face of such a patriarch of the Chen clan, what else can Chen Daoxuan say? Chen Daoxuan did not say a word, and bowed respectfully towards Chen Xianhe. Chen Xianhe calmly accepted Chen Daoxuan's salute, and after a while, he waved his hand. There are a total of 8,743 spirit stones here, and 635 caddies of various first-order spirit minerals, of which the most precious are 3A second-order spiritual mine. Chen Xianhe pointed to an exquisite wooden box in the far corner of the secret room. With the weight of these 3 second-order spiritual ore, I can barely make a second-order magic weapon, but my Chen family has been so many years, except for you, also failed to produce a refiner. Now, I give all of these things to you. After speaking, Chen Xianhe looked directly into Chen Daoxuan's eyes, and after getting his affirmative look, he nodded gratified. Patriarch, I have a question. Say. After arranging some words, Chen Daoxuan continued, since there are so many spiritual stones in the family, why don't you train more disciples in the family? Hearing this, Chen Xianhe first nodded, then shook his head. I understand what you mean, such a huge amount of wealth can indeed cultivate a few more monks for the family, so that the family can reproduce the prosperity of the immortal generation. But have you ever thought about how the cultivator's lifespan is only 120 years at most before the foundation building period? After this generation of cultivators has settled down, how can the Chen family, which has neither copper ore veins nor family savings, continue? Seeing that Chen Daoxuan did not speak, Chen Xianhe knew clearly that this kid definitely did not agree with the ideas of their older generation. But on second thought, Chen Xianhe was relieved again. Chen Daoxuan is different from them. Chen Daoxuan has good aptitude and talent for refining tools. He must think about doing everything in his power to develop and strengthen the family, rather than relying on the accumulation of generations to save a spiritual vein for the family. Dao Xian, I know that you want to grow your family. Not only you, but every generation of our Chen clan thinks this way, but you have to remember that the Xiaoxian family wants to grow. In addition to the inheritance of exercises, the spiritual veins are the true foundation of a family. Spiritual veins. Chen Daoxuan frowned. Yes, do you know why our Chen family can give birth to 13 monks of the immortal character generation? Chen Daoxuan shook his head. It's just the 7 spiritual eyes in the family. Speaking of this, Chen Zian he couldn't help but sigh. It may be the care of the ancestors, or it may be pure luck. The previous patriarch Chen Xianzhou discovered 4 spiritual eyes in a row in the Red Copper Mountains, plus the family's original 3 spiritual eyes. This gave birth to the grand occasion of the 13 monks of the Chen family. However, the spiritual eye is only rootless duckweed after all. Its appearance is irregular, and its exhaustion is also irregular. Chen Daoxuan was deeply touched by what Uncle 13 said. Because at the beginning of his practice, there were 2 spiritual eyes in the family, he and Chen Zian he were one. It was only when he reached the 2nd level of Qi refining that Uncle 13's spiritual eyes inexplicably dried up. At this point, only the last spiritual eye remained in the family. Seeing Chen Daoxuan's expressive expression, Chen Zian he continued, the spiritual vein is different. As long as the family cultivator does not die, it will not be exhausted. A cultivator family, as long as they master one spiritual vein, it means that the family has the foundation of inheritance. It is a pity that although the spiritual veins of Wangxinghai are wide, there is not a single spiritual vein without a master. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan thought thoughtfully, so, these savings of the family are trying to artificially give birth to a spiritual vein. That's right. Seeing that Chen Daoxuan was dumbfounded, Chen Zian he said with a smile, I know, you may think our ancestors are a little stupid. To artificially give birth to a spiritual vein, it not only needs to spend more than 100,000 spiritual stones, but also needs to put down Yunling Da array. But if our Chen family wants to truly gain a foothold in Wangxinghai, there is no other way than to master a spiritual vein. Hearing this, Chen Daoxuan was silent. He knew that Chen Zian he was right. Only with spiritual veins can we cultivate spiritual fields, plant spiritual medicines, and keep spirit beasts. The most important thing is that only with spiritual veins can the cultivators of the Chen family have enough spiritual energy to practice. Instead of being like Chen Daoxuan now, every day he practiced, he was trembling with fear, for fear that the spiritual eyes in the cave would be exhausted. As Uncle 13 said, this feeling is like rootless duckweed. Chen Daoxuan hates the feeling that his destiny is out of his control. He wants to change all this.